Um,
as well.
um, Harry's been wanting to talk about his ayahuasca trip. He talked about it briefly when he came here, and he did a show with Sheikh Amr, and he wanted some questions answered about it. Um, floor is yours, Harry.
So let's
Go
back
for it.
this up. So before I became Muslim, I was one of the things that I was reading and looking into was psychedelics because it's like think about PTSD, depression, anxiety, this, that, and the other. And also people are like having these incredible experiences where they're like going into other worlds. And what I was starting to realize about the psychedelic community is that their understanding of the universe and the spiritual realm is very similar to how Muslims perceive things. And what I mean by that, I mean that Islam, of all the major religions, in my opinion, especially the Judeo-Christian tradition, Islamic tradition, is the one that most makes sense and most aligns, in my opinion, with the psychedelic experience. With the fact that we have an entire surah in the Quran called Surah Al Jinn about the jinn, and that psychonauts, as they're called, uh, routinely encounter these kinds of entities and these DMT type experiences tells me that was telling me, speaking to me, it's like there's something going on here. Islam, of all the religions, seems to have the best understanding because Christianity doesn't have that understanding. Christianity has angels and demons. There's no such thing as a jinn or a spirit in
Yeah.
Christianity. There's angels and there's fallen angels, but we don't have that in Islam. That doesn't make sense to us. So, about 2 years ago, this is right as October 7th happened. In fact, I had this like 2 days after. I got invited to this ayahuasca retreat in Peru because I'd always wanted to try this. As part of it was a PTSD thing from Iraq, and part of it was just my sheer curiosity, and then also seeing Muslims talking about this and doing it. Mufti Abu Layth, who I know he's a very controversial dude, but I like him. He's a good dude. I don't agree with everything he says, but he was talking about this at a time when other people don't really want to talk about this. There's kind of this strange Muslim subculture of DMT and psychedelics, and people having profound spiritual experiences and becoming better Muslims either because they get scared, they have such terrifying experiences that it pushes them back into the fold of Islam, or because they like, oh yeah, it confirms what they were thinking and they're happy and they feel the love of Allah and they're like, oh, I'm so happy to be going to Salah every day. Um, so I was just deeply curious, and I also wanted to be sort of like a Islamic science guinea pig. I was doing like I'm doing this for Islamic science. Ooh, I was like I'm gonna go be a guinea pig too. I just so my curiosity, my desire to help myself, and also my desire to be a guinea pig and see what's up. Um, so this fans group called Heroic Hearts gave me an invitation.
It's
They
called
paid
Heroic
for
Hearts.
everything. It's Heroic Hearts. It's literally what it's called, and it is a
Hero Carts
non-for-profit group.
is a nonprofit that we work with. They're actually very closely associated or friends with our podcast here in Chicago.
It's not the
They do,
same one.
it's not the same
I have
group,
the
so I
same
just
one.
want people to
Oh, really?
understand Heroic Hearts. What that Harry's talking about is completely different from Heroic Hearts
Oh,
that we're
well,
often
yeah.
promoting and talking about donating to. Go for it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, here we had to make
Yeah, it
that
was
distinction right there.
and they were really, I mean, they're really cool people. And it was all I got a free ride to go down to Peru and go do this because it's not legal in most states. So I got a free trip to go down to Peru with a bunch of other veterans. I went with people who were Marines, infantrymen, intel officers, former Navy SEALs, former Rangers, big group of people across the military spectrum. And the interesting thing was, this is where it got really interesting because it was right around October 7th. We also had some Englishmen and even some former IDF members come on the trip.
Wow.
Astaghfirullah.
So it was an interesting experience. And so I got down there. We go to this town that's outside of a nature preserve. And we go from that hotel to the nature preserve, and it was this ayahuasca retreat center. is just basically in this beautiful rainforest nature preserve. It is like really beautiful at night to look at with the stars and it's incredible. It's got triple canopy. I mean, it's a really incredible place. And the maestro and maestra, which is basically a modern way of saying shaman, they perform these ceremonies and they give you the ayahuasca and you do 3 nights. So, what I would say is I had some good experiences from that, and there's also a lot of things that I'm very critical about this experience with. And so I want to, especially with you, Sheikh Amir, right here, I want you to have an open forum to grill me a little bit because I want to give some nuance. There's this problem I see in the Muslim world right now when it comes to this thing where it's either like, oh, this is Hummer, this is like literally like the same thing as drinking or doing cocaine. And then there's this other side that says, yeah, it's perfectly safe, it's perfect, no problem, don't worry about it. And I don't agree with either one of those positions. And again, I'm not a shaker or scholar, so this is not a scholarly opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. I want to share this experience so that people who are sheikhs and scholars can take this information and do what they will.
Yeah, so you
Okay.
basically had the experience of a type of remedy, and you want to be kind of the example of somebody who went through this as a Muslim, who had PTSD, and a lot of things weren't working for you. Modern day medicine was not really helping you, and ayahuasca, along with other treatments like people, they like microdose with psilocybin and
Mhm.
other things that can be found in nature to help PTSD. And you're not saying something was right or wrong. You just want to be the first person who is openly saying that they did this to help their PTSD, and you want to see in the arena of scholarship of Islam what they have to say about it. Basically, right? That's your
Right, and
position.
I want them to argue about it. I want them to dialogue. I don't want just sheikhs and scholars to just reflexively panic and go, "Oh, this is Hummer. Oh, this is Hummer." And I also don't want people to be too like lackadaisical here and ignore possible pitfalls. I mean, the first and foremost possible pitfall. And by the way, the people that were there, the Shipibo Indian tribes that run this, they're beautiful, wonderful people. Okay, they're not devil worshippers. They're not Aztec baby munchers. Okay, they're not evil people at all. They're very beautiful, sweet, kind, God-fearing people. From the Muslim perspective, though, they have their ways and we have ours.
No, I
But
understand.
what's their
Just like
religion though?
That was my
well,
first question.
technically they're Catholic, but the reality is that they're going to have their pre-Catholic belief system intertwined with Catholicism.
But what is
I
it?
the,
So if they're Catholics, for instance, right?
yeah.
Originally, but what do they actually believe now? Like what do they believe in as far as spirits, religion, God? If you were to ask them, yes, some of them may say I was originally Catholic, but I don't believe in that anymore. I believe in like this world because I know some people that I've discussed with online who became like the shaman and stuff you were referring to. They believe in this energy that of this world, and this energy
Mm.
they call it love. Some of them call it, your inner self. But what do they actually believe?
I would say that they're more like pantheists. Like they see just sort of God everywhere and everything.
Got it.
That would be how I would loosely describe them. And of course, they believe in spirits in the spirit realm. Um, there is sort of a new age hippie vibe in that a lot of the people running the camp, the white people from the United States and Europe are, they're kind of having, new age hippie sort of understanding of things. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, I grew up with a lot of new age stuff. Both my parents were really into that kind of stuff. And so there are some good things that tie in for that. There are some good things. There's also a lot of things that I think are just respectfully, I just think they're nonsense. But some of it, some of the new age movement comes from takes some parts of Sufism. So just like the Constitution was inspired, Thomas Jefferson was inspired by Islam. I'm not going to hate on all the Constitution or hate on everything about America. I'm also not going to hate on everything in the New Age movement. I see some value in it, and some of it it's not our religion, so we can't really take it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there.
Yeah, and the reason why I was
respectfully and just wrong.
yeah, the reason I was asking that is like what you're talking about is like for even with Thomas Jefferson, there's always going to be small issues that we agree with as Muslims, even though we don't agree with the whole ideology or the whole religion of anything. That can be with there's something maybe somewhere in Buddhism that Islam agrees with that it's allowed. It's mubah, right? It's something that's allowed. We just don't agree with the entire framework of the religion. The reason I'm asking that is just to start off, as far as these camps are concerned and these retreats, you have to understand the original concept of the people, which is why I asked about the religion, because even though they did have a religion as a base, but they have different inclinations, which takes them into other religious understandings. That concept itself is going to drive whatever they see to be good for everybody else, right? So, for an example, if you have a concept based on this energy of this world, which is full of love, which has nothing to do with Islam, obviously, right? But it's actually a false way. It's a false dichotomy of understanding what this world is, and then you're going to base other remedies and actions off of that. So they actually may not actually be Christian. They may be Christian by name, the same way we have Muslims by name, but they believe in something else, another power. They're not sure what that power is, which automatically to us, I hate to sound very blunt, but I'm just going to make this very cut and dry, and then we could talk about the nuances later. It's an act of kufr according to Muslims, right? Is that somebody who believes that there's this energy, they don't know where it comes from, but they need to do something to remedy themselves. And I'm not talking about ayahuasca as of right now. And based off of that concept that they have, they're going to present themselves and services to people because of that. So that idea is going to be infused. I mean, I've never been to an ayahuasca retreat. I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube for whatever that's worth, like hours of these retreats and what happens and how to calm these people down, the whole vomiting process and how to keep them from getting paranoid and to make them comfortable again, and the massages and the fanning and making them do certain stretches and all that. Like, I've seen a lot of that stuff. Again, I haven't been to an actual retreat, so I'll be completely honest with you about that. But what ends up happening here is that you have a group of people who don't believe nearly to the extent of who you believe is the creator, and they're offering based on and the original claim would be, we don't care what you believe, we just want you to get better. And obviously, I would think a majority of them actually believe that, right? But the infusion now takes place of, if that remedy works for a lot of people, is there a certain inclination that an individual could have towards, or a certain mercy and not critical towards this belief system that this individual has because of the remedy or the service that was provided? The second thing is,
that's a fair question.
Yeah, and the second thing is, because for us as Islam, we don't want to go anywhere near something that's kufr. We can live with people who are kafir and have kufr beliefs and ideas. Islam doesn't prohibit anyone from that. Rather, we have to be very merciful towards them. But to desensitize ourselves towards the disloyalty of Allah is a crime according to Muslims, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is that how we seek relief. I mean, if I was to tell you, and you're obviously came to the fold of Islam, so you know what being tested is like. So I don't need to inform you of that.
No, I sure do.
But
I sure do.
But what takes you back to Islam? For instance, if somebody does ayahuasca and they become more religious, let's say, right? They become more inclined towards Allah, whether it's through fear or they've seen something. The reason why that can be a dilemma is Islam is so specific on what testing is that we agree unanimously in Islam that we have to find modes of Islam to take us back to Islam, right? I think the thing that you're putting out here now is this a valid way of, number one, remedy of the, if you want to say mind, body, and soul, all of that combined, right? And number two, is it actually against Islam because you're talking about khamr and it's not like khamr and it's something very, very different, right? And I think once you can, and I think those are just a precursor to the entire conversation. If you're,
I have questions. I have answers to all your questions, by the way.
No, that's no. I
don't know
yeah.
if they're the right answers, but I do have answers.
Yes.
For you on all.
So taking an approach which would be considered, something that we're going to be considering, I guess, in the future with this is using ayahuasca for PTSD, because there's a lack of other medication present to help PTSD, and rather it just numbs you and doesn't cure the problem.
No, this doesn't. It doesn't numb you. That's not what it does.
No, I'm saying other PTSD
I,
medication that's out there in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
Well,
it's just
let me answer your questions here. You give me like 3 or 4 different questions here. I got to answer them before I forget what your questions are. So number one, here's what I would say. I don't know if this is Islamically right or not. So I don't know for sure. What I did ask the Shipibo Indians, I asked the 2 people running this thing is, could this be used in a Muslim context? And I was very pointed. I told the people running this group, and I told the Shipibo Indians through the translator, because they speak Spanish, it's like, can this be used in a non-Shipibo Indian context? And I said, I'm Muslim. And I said, and by the way, on X, I have a lot of Iraqi followers, and a lot of Afghan followers, believe it or not. And a lot of Iraqis enjoy talking to me, and I enjoy talking to them. And they tell me, they're like, yeah, for the last 50 years of warfare and chaos that's happened in Iraq and all the carnage, we have a lot of problems too. And I've had Iraqis who are sincere Muslims ask me what they think about ayahuasca and DMT. Because what ayahuasca is just a highly concentrated dose of DMT in that specific form through that tree bark that they get it from. And they've asked me, is like, what do you think about it? What the Shipibo Indians told me very pointedly was like, yeah, you don't have to do this in our context. You could do this in conjunction with your context. So this could be theoretically done in a Muslim context. And that would be my recommendation. Again, this is not scholarly or Sheikh. I don't have that. And by the way, I literally saw the DMT elves, and they told me to actually call Mufti Abu Layth and tell him that.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
And I actually did. I actually called Mufti Abu Layth. I got a hold of him and had a Zoom call with him. I said, listen, this is what the DMT elves told me to tell you, is that if you're going to do this, you should only do this in a Muslim context, not with other people, for the reasons that you just said, because they have their ways and we have ours. And that's always a problem. It's always a challenge. And it's not just ayahuasca or DMT. Anytime you're working with non-Muslims in a very close situation, you're always running the risk of taking on their ideology. If you go to a Christian hospital for surgery and they're praying, oh, Harry, we pray that in Jesus' name that this surgery works for you. It's like, you're not committing shirk by them praying on you, but you're coming into their ways. You're coming into their way of doing things. That's why a lot of scholars and sheikhs don't recommend Muslims moving to non-Muslim lands. That's why when you become Muslim, like I did, if you have the opportunity to make hijra, a lot of sheikhs and scholars will recommend that you make hijra.
Harry,
because there's more going on than just what's up.
Can you just rewind a bit and talk about how what led up to you seeing the elves and them telling you to talk to
I'll
Mufti
get into the real story.
You're kind of getting ahead.
Yeah, let's get into the let's get into the fun stuff. So they do this at night, okay? So it's about 8 p.m. when you do this, and you go what's called a maloka, and you sit with the maestro and maestra, and they got the brew. And it's this brew of it's made from a special type of tree bark, basically, and it's filled with DMT. And DMT is what happens when you're dreaming. It's been associated with spiritual experiences. There are some researchers who think that the burning bush of the Old Testament might be from the Joshua tree, which was filled with DMT and native to that part of the land.
Is that Terence McKenna or whatever?
That's Terence McKenna talking about that. I don't know if that's acceptable Islamically, but
no,
that's
the idea of Musa salam taking DMT is not part of Islamic tradition. I just want to make that clear.
I'm just telling you what I'm just telling.
No, I know what Terence McKenna says about this, and I just want listeners to understand that that's Terence McKenna's opinion, not any of ours. But when and this is just to be clear, this is from a bark of a tree, not a mushroom.
This is not a mushroom. This is from the bark of a tree.
Okay.
Or it's something affiliated with the tree. I don't know exactly. I'm not, I'm not them. I don't know what does, but not exactly how it works. But basically, it's loaded with DMT. DMT is the supposed spiritual molecule, which associated with dreaming, associated with visions, associated with all kinds of things, associated with seeing entities. Okay, and associated also with a high degree of self-awareness. Okay, so regardless of whether you're doing DMT in jungles of Peru through ayahuasca or doing through something through psilocybin in a smaller dosage, often what happens is you start becoming more self-aware of your faults. So this is where the whole spiritual dimension comes in, and the self-improvement dimension comes in. So anyway, we go into what's called the Maloka. I'm sitting in a group of 8 people. Everybody has their own little bed or cot that you can go lay down after you drink this. I come up and I drink it. I decide to say, I'm going to say Bismillah. I said Surah Nas, I just to make sure there's, because I agree with Sheikh Amir here. There is a possibility that demons can reach you. If you're going to go into the spiritual realm, so to speak, or even with dreaming, we always say all this stuff, put an aura on ourselves. We always say Bismillah. Sufis will tell you to do wudu before you go to sleep, even, because, you're going into that realm. You're going to a mini death. And I would describe this ayahuasca experience as a very intense type of dreaming, and almost like a simulator of the Day of Judgment. That's how I would describe it. So anyways, I went up, it was my turn to get the drink. I took my drink. Tastes horrible. It is like it literally tastes like the worst kind of tree bark imaginable. And I went back and sat on my cot. And then everybody took their stuff. Within a few minutes, people started crying and having problems, and you could see some of the other people in the group. I don't want to say their names. I don't embarrass them. But they're like, "Why did Uncle Jimmy molest me? Don't touch me!" And people were having horrible experiences, and people were crying about their failed marriages. And I wasn't having. Shake, you're trying really hard not to laugh. I can see
no, he's broken. He's laughing.
He's like, and so
as soon as you talk about kitty fiddlers, he just laughs.
That's kind of weird that you like that. It's funny, Shake. I don't have to say.
That's an extremely traumatic thing, Chef.
It's extreme, but the way he said it was something else. That's why I'm laughing. Yeah. I'm not laughing.
I was like,
you're so insensitive, Chef.
There's another person who was like, "I'm sorry, Sandra. I was a terrible husband." Just having this horrible experience, and I'm just sitting here for 5-10 minutes, and I'm like, man, nothing is happening. I wasn't having any effects whatsoever. And I was just kind of getting annoyed. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go up there. I'm going to get another dose. I'm going to get another dose of this stuff. And that's when I heard a voice. And it was so clear. And it said, "You're so effing impatient, white boy." And I was like, oh boy, wow. Oh, okay.
It literally said white boy?
It said white boy. "You're so effing impatient, white boy." And I was like, oh wow.
Was it demonic like that, the way you're making it out to be?
It was very serious. And it wasn't demonic, but it's very strong. It's "You are just so effing impatient." It was
I'm imagining Iago from Aladdin, that kind of voice. "You're impatient." You know how I can't do that, but Iago voice, but that's what I'm imagining.
The Iago voice. It was kind of serious. It was kind of you are way out of line. Yeah. Why can't you just be patient? And so I was like, oh, okay, now we're getting into something serious here. And so that's when I saw the elves, and they came to me, but they were very scary looking. And they said, "Oh, by the way, we're a bunch of jinn, and we're here to possess you." And I was like, oh no, I should have listened to Sheikh Amir. I should have listened to everybody in Chicago who was telling me not to do this. I'm going to have to go back to Texas and get a rukia. I'm so ashamed. This is going to be really bad. And they're like, yeah, we're going to possess you. And I was starting to punch them. I'd see these awful looking faces, and I start punching them. And then they started like singing this song. They're like, and they're like singing the song from the Doom Eternal game. You know, like if
Yeah.
you ever played Doom Eternal, like you know that soundtrack. And they're like making fun of me like I'm trying to be the Doom Slayer punching them. And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna possess you. There's nothing you can do. You can't pray. There's nothing you can do. Ha 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 ha." And I was like, "Uh-oh. All right, what are you guys? So you guys the Gen? Are you really the Gen here to possess me?" And they're like, "No, we're not the Gen." I was like, "Well, what are you then? Do you love God? Do you worship Allah?" And they said, "Of course we worship Allah because we're you." And then there was a lot of weird video game and movie references in this experience. They like started playing the theme song from Five Nights at Freddy's. Da, 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 da.
This
You hear
guy.
these kids go, "Yay, congratulations, you found us, Harry." And they turned into these like little Keebler elves with my big head on top of it. You know the Keebler elves
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
Keebler
yeah.
cookies? Yeah, so it's little Keebler elves with my big head on it. Hooray, we're you! Hooray, you found us! So there's these little cartoon character versions of me. And then they played a movie for me of Jordan Peterson and Terrence McKenna having a conversation where Jordan Peterson asks them if they're other entities or they're you, a part of you. And Terrence McKenna's like, "Yeah, they're actually a part of you. They're just a manifestation of you. They're not other entities." And so I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. You are me." Because I was me, I would play this kind of prank on me for the first time doing ayahuasca. And I'd pretend to like be an evil djinn and like try, because he freaked me out. You're me. You're me playing a prank on myself. Yeah, you're you. You're me. That's right. Yeah. Once I realized, actually, that is something I would do on people. Like, oh, yeah, you're not the djinn. You're me. So it's like how do I explain this? It's like Microsoft Paperclip had that annoying the paperclip guy with the eyes on it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a
Clippy.
separate
Remembers that.
computer.
I think his name's Clippy.
Clippy, yeah.
Yeah.
The elves are like your Clippy. They're like, "Hey, you're screwing this up. You're retarded. You're doing something stupid. Hey, how do you fix this?" They're a part of you that's talking to you.
Okay.
So they're not the jet. And I'll explain that
So
more
this seems
later.
like fragments of your personality that have kind of manifested into beings that you can communicate with, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like Clippy talking to you on your screen saying,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Which
you
is a
wanna
type
know how
of
to fix this
hallucination.
problem?"
That's a type
Yeah.
of hallucination.
It's a type of hallucination. Yes,
Yeah.
it is a type of hallucination. Um, so basically, my Clippies, my DMTLs were like little miniature versions of me, and they said, "Hey," and they for some reason they spoke in Monty Python voices, which was really hilarious. They were like, "Hey, hello, we're your DMTLs. We have a message for you. Would you like to receive it?" I was like, "Why are you talking to me in Monty Python voices, bro?" "Yeah, we got a message for you, mate. Are you ready for it?" I was like, Sure." And they're like, "Why are you so angry?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why am I so angry? I'm not angry." It's like, "Oh, you're really angry all the time." I was like, "No, but you've got all this resentment about bad things that bad people did to you, huh? And if you don't let go of that anger, you're going to become just like them." I'm like, "Oh, really?" It's like, "Yeah. Oh, your life's so bad, Harry. That's so bad, isn't it? Did your mommy and daddy not give you enough hugs and love and kisses when you were a little boy? Yeah? Is that what it is? Oh." I'm like, "No, my life's doing okay." "Yeah, your life is doing okay. So why are you so angry?" They would like make fun of me. They just roasted me all the time. And then they're like, "Oh, look, are you like these people over here who got molested when they were little boys and little girls?" And like these people are crying in the background. And I'm like, "Yeah, you got a point. My life's really not that bad. Why am I angry about things? Why am I resentful about people and bad things that happen to me?" They're like, "Yeah, you're so stupid, white boy. Why are you so angry?" And then they just kept going on and on. As they started calling me names. They're like, "Harry the Tiger." And it's interesting. I looked up later what is a tiger in Islamic dream interpretation. A tiger is actually a tyrant. So it's like they're saying, if you don't let go of this anger and resentment, you're going to become tyrannical. Like the people who abused you, who lied to you, who cheated you, who hurt you. I was like, oh. And then they would say, Harry, the colonizer. And I was like, I'm not a colonizer. And then they took a projector thing of this photo of me and my wife in the like the old Dutch administration area in Jakarta, where the Dutch had their old colonial administrative buildings, and I had like this pithy hat because it's a tourist area. This Dutch colonial area had, and I had my wife on a bicycle, and they're like, "You're the colonizer," and they're like calling me a colonizer and all this stuff, and I'm like, I just like they just roasted me, and I started to realize, oh, they're criticizing me, they're making fun of me. And they're like they're not being making fun of me to be mean. They're trying to get me to understand something about myself to improve my behavior. And then they said, Harry, the very horny honey badger, Georgie,
What the hell
Porgy,
is going on there?
Harry Pie.
But are you a
Kissed all-
horny honey badger though, Harry?
He kissed all the Indonesian girls and he made them all cry. That's what they. So they're like, oh yeah, I guess it's like I guess you guys got a point. I'm a little. I do like the ladies, so I should probably be nicer to them and not be mean to them or hurt their feelings. Yeah, Harry, you should be nicer. Yes,
This is
and
so
they just
trippy, dude.
roasted me repeatedly. And then they said, oh, what do you think, Harry? If you had just stuck with Quran and Sunnah, you wouldn't have to come down here. You're so silly. What are you doing here? And then the Shipibo Indian, the maestro and maestra started singing songs in their little native language, and it was really beautiful. Like, hey, and people are like crying and still having these terrible experiences, and the elves are like, see, your life's not so bad, and didn't your prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, tell you not to be angry? Didn't he say to a man, don't be angry 3 times? Oh, and by the way, don't be angry, Harry. And I was like, oh yeah, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did say that, didn't he? And then they said, see, you didn't have to come here, silly white boy. What are you like are you Indiana Jones, Harry? And then there's like a DMT elf of me dressed up like Indiana Jones going over that pitfall game from the 1980s trying to get the temple treasure. So they're just like what like, did you fly on a winged horse? Do you think you're special? Yes, Harry, did you fly on a winged horse? Yeah, are you special? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm not special, and you're right. There's no reason for me to be angry. And they're like, Harry, if you had just followed Quran and Sunnah, you wouldn't have had to come down here to Peru. Silly white boy. You already had the answer. And I was like, oh, yeah, you got a point there. This is pretty silly. I'm a pretty silly guy. And I just started laughing at myself. The more they roasted me, the more I started laughing at myself. I'm so ridiculous. I'm such a ridiculous person. I'm so full of myself. I'm so angry, holding on to all this resentment. And, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you already told me not to be angry. So then they like, Harry, why'd you come flying a winged horse with us? And then it was like this 2-dimensional video game, like Geometry Wars or something, and 2 of the elves hopped on a winged horse. Like literally hopped on a winged horse. And they're like, they start flying away and they're like, wait. I'm like walking through this desert and like, wait, guys, wait, don't leave me behind. And they're like, oh, you're getting very far away, Harry. Bye-bye. No, yeah, don't leave me here in the desert. And then the scene changed. And I know this is going to sound really controversial, but this has happened to many, many people. And again, I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know if this is a true dream or if this is just a hallucination. So Allah forgive me, people forgive me, but I'm not the only Muslim that had this experience. And I think that this is pretty close to the dream world. So all the things that apply to seeing this in the dream world, both the good or the bad, is it shaitan or is it real, would apply here as well. I think in that they took me to this masjid in the middle of a desert, and it was kind of like the movie The Messenger. That 1970s movie, Sheikh Amir, The Messenger.
You mean The Message?
The Message, yeah.
Yes,
where
yes.
you can't see Prophet Muhammad, you can't see the Sahaba's faces, you can't see his wives. You just kind of know that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
they sat me down before they stopped being silly. The elves stopped being silly, and they started to become very reverent and serious.
Hmm.
And they're like, I'm sitting on these stairs in front of this man. I said, "Who is this man? I can't even. His face is so bright, I can't even look at his face." And I'm like, "Oh, this is your Rasulullah, and he loves you, and you are part of this nation. You're a Muslim now. You're part of this Muslim nation." And I said, "Well, aren't I American? Aren't I Texan?" And they said, "Oh, that's nice that you're American or that you're Texan or that you like Indonesia, but you are a Muslim first and foremost. And every Muslim is your brother, even the Salafis that you disagree with."
The Salafis.
They said they were very reverent. They said, "This is your Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he loves you." And then I was handed a Quran, and they said, "You had all the answers right here. You didn't need to come here." And then the Quran, that was in my hands turned into like stars and moons. And then this background of stars and moons, they put up the words of Surah Al-Fatiha in English for me. And they said, the elf said to me, they pulled out like a laser pointer. He goes, "What do you say before you go to pray?" And I said, "You say, billahi minash shaitanir rajim." "Oh, so you seek refuge from the Satan. And what do you do why do you come to an ayahuasca experience? Why do you do DMT?" "Well, because I'm broken and I'm seeking refuge." "Oh, okay, interesting." And say, "What do you do when you say, how do you start the Surah Al-Fatiha?" You say, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. "Oh, so name of the most kind, most wise, most merciful, huh?" "Yeah." And so what happens in Surah Al-Fatiha towards the end? "Oh, guide us towards the straight path and lead us not astray." You're like, yeah, yeah. So what happens when you're going to these? If you're coming with the right intentions, what happens when you're doing DMT? Oh, you get guidance and it leads you back to the straight path. They said, "Yeah. So why did you come here? If you're just taking your Salah seriously, you don't have to come here, silly white boy. You didn't have to come here at all." In fact, if you do your Salah with good intentions, it's it's kind of like that experience. Not necessarily that you're going to see things and feel things all the time, but you already had Salah. You didn't have to come here. So they just roasted me. And then after that, for the rest of the night, that was just the first night. They just roasted me and told me over and over and over again, "Don't be angry. Oh, and by the way, the X, Y, and Z thing in your life that you need to fix this, that, here, this, that, and the other. Oh, by the way, don't be angry." And then that was the first night. There were 2 more nights after that.
Go for it.
Okay. So the second night, I came back, did the process again, went back down, slept, and then started seeing things. And they were much more serious this time. And I came back with some more questions. I said, so if you guys are the elves and you're not the jinn, then who are the jinn? And then they put on a show for me where it was like a casino with the gambling machines where it's going. It was like this.
Like a slot machine?
One-armed bandit. Yeah, slot machine. You're pulling a slot machine, and it's like Yetis and UFOs and aliens are going up and down like this thing, like a slot machine, and then it goes jinn, 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 saying that all these supernatural weird phenomena, ghosts, the aliens, Yetis, whatever, those are the jinn. That's what they were telling me with that. And then I said, okay, well, I've had this sleep paralysis jinn, demon, whatever people want to call it, for the longest time. And I have, and this is a true story. I have had this thing where I have like the thing sitting up on top of your chest and you can't move. And a lot of people have this. It's really terrifying. Yeah. Not everyone has, not majority, but
I've
some
had
people
that happen
do
to
have.
me. Yeah.
It's really terrifying.
I had to call Sheikh Hammer, and Sheikh Hammer gave me different adhkar and dhikr and different things to say before sleeping, and it stopped.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. That definitely helps. I've been doing that myself. And what these elves said to me is, they said that this is a creature that attached itself to you when you were a child going through your parents' divorce and you had to deal with all that. It feeds off of your anger and fear. It's like a hyena. It's a scavenger and it feeds off you. And it feeds off all of your resentment from how things that happened after the war. It feeds on all your resentment and anger and frustrations that happen from your divorce. It just feeds on your anger and resentment and fear.
Yeah,
It feeds on
the
your negative energy.
Latin culture has that. It's called a kukui or something like that. It's supposed to be like a boogeyman type of a thing that feeds off of fear, and fear, depression, sadness, and I think it's just another type of jinn. I think, but it's often talked about in Latin culture. HBO had a long series on it. I can't remember the name, but
Yeah, yeah. It's and what they said to me, they said is, so long as you hold on to this resentment and fear, and so long as you are not forgiving people, and they didn't say you have to put up with people being terrible to you, but as long as you're holding on to anger and resentment and wanting revenge and to hurt people, this creature is going to come, and you can say all the sirs you want, you can do all the dhikr you want. If you don't improve your character, if you don't purify your heart, if you don't let it go, it will still keep coming. You can do some things with reciting Quran to protect yourself, but it's always going to keep coming back because you're always going to be feeding it. It's always going to sense food for you to eat. And I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I gotta let this go. And then they started getting silly. I saw this one elf. He came out dressed up like Elsa from Frozen. He's like, let it go, let it go, just throw it away. As though you're talking about the thing about people vomiting. Some people did vomit, and they're like, hey, why don't you just vomit and let go of all that rage and anger? I was like, I don't really want to throw up right now. And they're like, well, you better just let it go, let it go. And they're like, just throw it away. And so like people the next day were asking me like, so why were you like playing NBA or something? Why were you shooting baskets? And I was like, oh, I was letting it go and throwing it away.
oh my god,
they
so
thought I was
funny.
playing They thought I was playing basketball or something. But
By the way, the show I was talking about is called The Outsider on HBO. It's a really good show.
Yes.
Check it out.
Very good show. Yeah, so that's what happened, and
And what about third day? I mean, that was kind of the crux of the second day. What about third day?
third day was kind of like the same stuff. But the third night was interesting because there was one other person who was Muslim in there, and he was from Nigeria.
Convert
And
or
his mother was Christian and his father was Muslim.
yeah.
And he was trying to decide for himself what he actually believed in. So he was going on kind of a journey to try and figure out what was real. And he had come to America as a kid, and he was, former infantryman in the U.S. Army. And we had some interesting discussions. But the third night, I woke up and I saw him, an ex-Army Ranger who's from, Catholic background, and a third guy who's spiritual but not religious and from like Northwest, former Marine, and they were all in Sujood. And I was like, they were all like this in Sujood.
Wait,
And I asked them,
is this a hallucination or were they
no,
actually?
they were all three of them were literally in the Sujood position, and this is common that people will get in the Sujood position. And I woke up, and I kind of like, like in the state, I'm like, oh no, is this something? Are they like bowing to Quetzaltenango? Oh man, I'm in a lot of trouble. I've really made a mistake here now. I was like, but then I asked them the next day, what were they doing? And they said, were you bowing to the maestro? And they said, no. What they said is, I was bowing. I felt like this incredibly loving, kind, and strong presence that was also passing judgment on me and showing me things about my life that were wrong. And it was like, he was really kind and loving and merciful. I was like, yeah, Yeah, he was really kind, and they just felt this profound sense of love and gratitude, and they didn't know why they were doing. They just felt compelled to be in subdued. They don't call it subdued, but that's what they're in. I'm thinking about like conservative Catholic political commentator Vincent James, who's like America First hardcore kind of Nick Fuentes guy. He's Catholic, but he says he prays in subdued because he just feels closer to God doing that, or something of that nature. And I was like, this is really fascinating. This is like a Muslim or, born Muslim, and then two people that are not Muslim doing the exact same thing, describing similar experiences here. And I'm like, that's really wild.
Did you at any point fall in sujood also, or no?
No, I mean, I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. I continued to make salah back in my room, back home, back in the barracks, back in the cot, not in the cot, but outside later.
While you
back
were on ayahuasca too?
No, not on ayahuasca. No, I just didn't feel comfortable with doing that. I just wasn't sure because it's like I'm kind of like going in as like excited, but I'm also kind of like being skeptical too.
Yeah. Because that's another dilemma too, right? When you're that much under the influence of something, right? You can't pray either, right? So that's another dilemma. Even though it's a type of remedy, one of the first but basic things people are going to ask is like, if you're in this situation, can you pray, right? And you're going to have to miss your prayers too, right?
Yeah, you'd have to do it after Isha, right?
Yeah. And how long does it usually last? Like 7 to 8 hours?
It doesn't last that long. It typically lasts like 3 or 4 hours, and that starts to wear off. What I would say is that I've had similar experiences and I don't mean to toot my own. Please don't think because I see Prophet Muhammad or I peace be upon him, or I have some kind of experience that this means I'm a special person. I'm not.
I already have deemed you an awliya.
Oh, geez, no! Please don't visit my grave. Please don't.
Please don't visit my
We are setting up your grave in our studio here.
There's no
people
there's
will
no
be
candy.
making ziyara here to TMM Studios.
before he's even gone.
Beer,
There's no
Harry.
candy there. Please don't come. Please don't come. There's no candy.
Beer,
So
Harry.
like, I just, but when I was, last Ramadan, not the last Ramadan, but the Ramadan before that, in Jakarta, I was going to Masjid Istiqlal, which is the giant masjid the size of a Costco here in downtown Jakarta, and Tahajjud gets really serious. You pray it late at night. It's 2 a.m. You're really deep in there, like Allah, 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 and they're like very, very, very serious into it. And I started perceiving sounds and reality in the same way as I did when I was under ayahuasca. So I kind of had a mini, and I've talked to other people that have had this during Tahajjud, where they have like they start like, because when you're on ayahuasca, like your sense of time and sound changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tying this in with Sufism, and this is where,
So the tahajjud in Jakarta is a different. You guys are doing like Sufi type rituals over there, where you're doing.
No.
So
I think he's talking about the echo because the place is so big. When you hear the Allah Akbar.
No, you don't understand. The echo I'm hearing, it wasn't the echo from the building. The echo was me starting to perceive reality like I was under a DMT experience.
Yeah. So sometimes, when you're under sometimes a very excited or emotional state, you can get like a high-like feeling, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens with human beings. That's what I think he's referring to. Yep.
Yeah. So this is the best criticism of ayahuasca that I've seen is from Sheikh Nurjan, who is, Naqshbandi Sufi. He has that channel, The Mohammedan Way, which, he's not goofy Sufi. He's not just some new agey hippie. He's like an actual proper, guided and trained and groomed sheikh, who spent many years doing what he did to become where he's at. His criticism of ayahuasca was not that it's Hummer. His criticism of ayahuasca was that you're going into that realm before you've been prepared and you don't have the guidance of a sheikh. And so creatures can attach themselves to you, or you become very delusional and arrogant. And I think his understanding, his answer was the best argument against ayahuasca because this wasn't like drinking. I mean, I've been an alcoholic before. This was I've never done cocaine, but I know what that's like. I've smoked weed before. And by the way, the Shipibo Indians don't use marijuana because they consider it to be a demonic trickster plant that can confuse people.
Yeah.
And you see how many people have serious addictions to marijuana, and you can see why.
Changes the brain too.
This
but,
is
yeah.
It changes the brain in the worst possible way sometimes. Ayahuasca, as I said, it is not something you do recreationally. I can't talk. Recreationally,
So funny.
it's not
It's like
something
watching a
that
cartoon
you.
sometimes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not something that you'd want to go do every day. You certainly wouldn't want to do this while you're flying a plane. What it is their technology is their ceremony is a simulation for the Day of Judgment. And Graham Hancock, who wrote The Fingerprints of the Gods, who is not a believer in God himself, but he does believe in the afterlife, which is an interesting combination. He describes he describes it in similar terms. Like he went to Peru or the Amazon and did this, and he said on the Joe Rogan show that the Mother Ayahuasca, as he calls it, showed him that he needs to stop smoking weed so much, or he was going to lose his life and answer for it on the Day of Judgment. So, it's like a very intense type of dreaming,
Yeah.
and it's like a simulator.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, just as
Not
far
to
as
be
the Khamr,
trifled with.
no, yeah, just as far as the Khamr is concerned, look, the reason why alcohol is referred to as a type of Khamr, it's not the only Khamr, is not only does it mask the original changes in the function of the brain, it actually covers, because Khamr originally means to cover something, it covers what the intellect and the consciousness and the brain is actually supposed to be doing on a regular basis, right?
The baseline.
Right.
The baseline, thank you, right? So any changes that occur, like you said, you can't drive an airplane, you couldn't drive a car, you wouldn't be comfortable driving like a family of people to a certain destination. In a similar way, alcohol is a type of khamr. It is not the only khamr, right? It's again a different type of baseline that Allah made haram in the Quran because it does certain things. But even if it didn't, even if it was, look, Allah says it's that the khamr and maisir, the khamr and gambling has many benefits to it, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously is the most honest. And even though there's benefits in it, he's telling us it's still haram, right? And the haram that it brings, or the harm that it brings, outweighs all the benefits that it can bring, right? So the other thing is that even the way you're describing ayahuasca was very elaborate. It was very entertaining and awesome. I appreciate that. But it also tells you that it changes the natural disposition of the brain to something else. And it gives you, now, what you call, what some of us may call, and it may as well bring lots of benefit. Let's just say that it brings lots of benefit. Forget about all the things about talking about whether it's halal or haram. Let's talk about the benefit factor. Can it bring lots of benefit and self-reflection? Yes. I mean, based on what you're telling us, of course, it has. And it made you realize certain things. Now, let's just say there wasn't any demonic involvement. It literally just took everything from your subconscious in your brain and gave you the answers. I think that's the angle that you're kind of coming at it from. It gave you the answers of what you had, but it took you to go there to realize all of that, and it probably had a lasting effect on you, right? And I'm just talking about on a very worldly level, not an Islamic level, not a legally Islamic level. It just gave you a bunch of self-reflection on a very, very exaggerated, very hyperbolic level of who you are and what you need to do, and don't be angry, and this is you, these are all your problems, right? But now the dilemma comes about is, just me thinking out loudly, is when somebody opens themselves up to that level that nothing else can do to you on your regular basis, right? And just being a normal human being, nothing can do that. The involvement of bringing something else to do that, that's where I think the scholarly research has to be done, is
Yes.
since it's not alcohol, But nothing can bring you to this dreamlike state and start giving you answers is consuming something. I think that's the crux of the question now. Is that can something like that be allowed Islamically?
Well, the green men are
Yeah.
telling him. The green men themselves are telling him that you don't need to come here.
Yeah, but see now,
Yeah.
if the green men are telling him that, that's true. But the next step is now. This is where we get a little into the metaphysical. How do we know? There's no way of knowing. It's doubtful to know that that's all him.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's very beautiful, like if you look at it from afar, that they told him about Surah Al-Fatiha, they brought him to who he thought to be Rasulullah. Is it far-fetched for shayateen to do that to somebody to deceive them? No, it's not.
It's
Yeah.
totally possible.
It's
yeah.
totally possible.
That is a real
And they can
consideration.
make you feel like, obviously, and maybe they will, but we don't know what was actually embedded within him, within that whole scenario and scene of theater that he had. That yes, of course, it was all benefit. I saw Rasulullah. I saw they showed me Surah Al-Fatiha. But in that, is it possible for shayateen to show somebody all that and deceive them and cling on to something
Absolutely,
within him? It's
yeah.
very
Sure,
possible.
Sure.
You know?
This is a real
So I think
possibility.
that's where
I have considered that. Yeah.
no, and I think
It
that's
is
where, and I'm not
something
giving you an
possible.
answer. I'm just thinking out loudly. I think that's where the research actually has to be done now. Does that mean that a
Yes,
bunch of scholars
yes,
have to
that's
go
where
do
it
an
does.
ayahuasca, another group of scientists and scholars monitor them?
No,
Wallahu
I'm your
alam.
guinea. Listen, guys, I'm your guinea pig. Listen, if you're, Yasser Qadi, listen to this, doing this, like you always do, or if you're like, the brother is saying a crazy story. What's his
No.
name?
Come and talk to
The
Harry,
brother-
guys. Come and talk to Harry.
No,
Pick
no.
his brain.
You just- you
Sheikh,
watch this episode. You don't actually have to do it. Just listen to my story, or listen to the story of other people. You have plenty of other Muslims
wanna
who've
know other
done this.
people. Who's doing the research
You can
on
make
it?
an SGH jihad from that. You guys don't actually have to go and do this unless you want to. But I actually don't recommend that Muslims go down to Peru and do ayahuasca. This is not a scholarly or Sheikh opinion. I think I agree with all the things you said, Sheikh. These are all valid questions. I would say that all the questions you're bringing up about ayahuasca are similar to dreams. Like people see Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in dreams all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And sometimes, many times it's good, but sometimes it's shaitan deceiving people
Yeah,
too.
that's what dreams
Like,
are. But
or sometimes
but
it's just your
but the
ego.
fact that I think that you're putting yourself out there and having people like, I mean,
Yes,
it's
it's a
pretty blatant.
problem.
I think that you are very brave to be a specimen of research, and I think that's pretty awesome. But I think that people need to definitely reach out to you and get a lot more detail because look, at the end of the day, again, I'm not condoning anything. I'm not saying anything as of right now except this, that big pharma has failed a majority of human beings, right? And the money making factor is much more important than humans. The profit is much more important than humans when it comes to big pharma, right? I think that's pretty much understood now. It's almost objective, I guess. Objective. And the medication that is out for PTSD, and you can speak on this, that's out there, that's prescribed to people who come back from war and traumatic experiences and all of the above, is not actually curing them. It's actually having them numb some of their senses and having them more dependent on this medication, so their insurance companies can dish out thousands of dollars per few batch of pills, right? And I don't think that's actually solving the problem. So what I think Harry has done in this search of finding a cure and help and harmony from PTSD is what many other people have found a cure in, or have felt they found a cure in it, right? And I think it's very honest of you, and that's amazing of you. And you telling people not to try it actually tells us how honest you are, because you don't want a whole bunch of people to try it just to test it out.
I want to. Here's what this is. I'm gonna back up here. A couple of things. First of all, this is not just PTSD. This is depression. This is any kind of thing.
Yes.
All these drugs really have been shown not to be very helpful. A lot
At
of
all,
these things are
yes.
just making.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca specifically for people who are schizophrenic. I'm going to put this word because I had a schizophrenic friend. Oh, I want to try this. No. If you're the schizophrenic, not even a Muslim answer. This is just universal. No, do not do that. Like medical doctors who study this will say schizophrenic people specifically cannot do this. They'll go crazy. They'll literally lose touch with reality more than they already have. So if you're schizophrenic and you're thinking about doing this, I'm putting this out there right now. The answer is medically, Islamically, universally, common sense. No. For everybody else, it's a gray area. But the other thing also I want to point out is I don't really have the kind of PTSD like some people have. I have mostly problems with sleep.
Got it.
So and then the it's not even I don't even know if it's PTSD or if it's just insomnia at this point. It could be just because I was a truck driver for 5 years after that. I just went back and forth across time zones every single day for years on end that I just permanently destroyed my sleep clock. That could just be it. I don't know. I do feel better after this experience, but it's not like this things all just go away. And so I'm not, without going into too much detail, um, this is not going to fix your problems. What it would do at best is give you a roadmap for things that you need to fix in your own life. It's an ongoing. That's why the people in that community, the psychedelic ayahuasca community, always say we're doing the work, because the reality is you're not just going to see things and like have great experiences and oh you're a saint now. No, you got a lot of work to do. And they recognize that the people that are sincere in that community that do this in a sincere way recognize that. So this is my thoughts. This is just purely my recommendation based on my experience. It is not. This is not a scholarly or sheikh opinion. And I told Mufti Abu Layth this, and I will tell anybody who asks, if there is a room for this in Islam, it should only be done in a Muslim context. And I don't think it needs that high of a dosage. I think people could do a much smaller dosage and just have some counseling or do a ruqya and just kind of like sit there and have more contemplation. But I will say this one final thing. About a year ago, I was given an invitation into Sufism, and I became Nashbandi. I became Nashbandi Sufi a little less than a year ago. So now that I am Sufi and I have the guidance of Sufism and Sufi sheikhs, and I'm under their purview, I don't see any reason for me to go do ayahuasca again or anything like that. And as I said, like Sheikh Nurjan says on YouTube, he made this really good point. Doing ayahuasca without when you're doing this in a non-Muslim setting without preparation, and you're going to go do this ayahuasca, you're opening yourself to possibly demonic interference. Yeah, you might see God. Yeah, you might experience the love of Allah, but that's why in traditional Sufism, you're supposed to do all this tasawwuf, all this work on yourself, all this self-reflection, all this meditation, all this zikr, and then Allah gives you the experiences when Allah wants to give you. That's why I was sharing the story of going to tahajjud and then perceiving sound and time and noise. And it felt like I was going through a DMT experience again, like that in Peru, because that was Allah giving me that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Now, the one thing I will push back on a little bit is I did spend a lot of time, after going through divorce 3 years ago and then spending a lot of time trying to fix myself. I was going to masjid every day here. Came back to Indonesia trying to get import-export business up and running. And I was coming to masjid every day, and I was like just eating better food. And, so I was going through this divorce and then like detox and changing things in my life. And, not removing stupid people from my life that were dragging me into really bad things. So before I did that ayahuasca experience, even though I wasn't doing it exactly the way the organization told me to do it, I was spending a lot of time prepping myself before that experience. So I'm going to put this warning out there. If you decide to do that, don't do it with this attitude of, I'm just going to go have fun and go see the fairy tale chicks. That is a terrible attitude. You will get in a lot of trouble if you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something you have to prepare for.
Traditionally, I know at least for past thousands of years, whenever people wanted enlightenment, I'm talking about the sages, the people who are wise men, who are anyone who's worth mentioning in terms of wisdom, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, they all went on in seclusion, in khalwa. And that helped them sort out their thoughts a lot better. And before anyone goes into this type of territory or is considering exploring this as a treatment, I would highly encourage them to just pull out of society, turn off the phones, and
That's a great idea.
and go into just nature. Go out west if you're in the States. Go out west into the Rockies and spend some time there in seclusion. Set up a tent. It can be done very cheap. You don't need to be a wealthy person unless you want a log cabin and all the amenities that come with it. But it can be done on a very low budget where you just find a place of solitude and where you can sort out who you are, what your purpose is in life, how are you going to achieve your objectives and find meaning. The majority of what I found with people when it comes to depression and their own just mess in their life is lack of purpose, lack of direction. They don't know where they're headed. They don't know what their use is in the world. And when men don't have purpose and they can't find utility and they can't find people who they can serve, they're like Ronin. They're like samurai who don't have a master.
Because they're meant to serve.
They're meant to serve a purpose. They're meant to be part of a family. It's majority of the reason why men are the least likely to initiate a divorce, because they, as horrible as their wife may be, they are there to serve their family. And when they're without a family, for example, it's devastating.
It's reckless,
it's just your entire world is spinning and you don't know why you even exist.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up. Super important. So from Yaqeen Sheikh Aduro, I think his name is, he started a program. And this is just so you know how to get started, because it's not very difficult. He started a program where I think he took like 40 men.
Yeah.
They went into the wilderness. They went camping. No technology, nothing.
Yeah.
Just wake up in the morning, pray Fajr together, talk, chill, have chai together, have a dars, wake up, do a workout, do a run, come back to the cabin, eat, everybody make lunch together, whatever the case is. Just a whole bunch of brothers together, no technology, nothing. To get them in the habit of being able to escape, so eventually you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
And you need to maybe a few other people. The reason why I think he did that, which was a lot of wisdom in, is going into khalwa also means that you had a suhba before going to khalwa. If you're always in khalwa, meaning that you don't have any friends, you don't have a good friend circle, you don't have good people you depend upon, and then you go into khalwa, that can actually make things a lot worse for you. When you're back to base, you have to have a good group of brothers that you're around all the time, for the most part, that are on the deen, that remind you of something if you're going to do something wrong. And then from that also, because you have to deal with the rest of the world, that's kind of like your remedy for the rest of the world. And then you, for instance, a type of i'tikaf outside of Ramadan, inside of Ramadan. But the other thing, because you were talking about serving, one of the best remedies that I found, not remedies as like fixing a diagnosis of depression, but one of the things that makes you feel amazing is helping people, especially if it's without a cost, right? So serving people and helping people, like even if you just think about the feeling, you're just helping somebody on a very simple level. Whether you see them at the store, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, it actually makes you feel amazing, and nobody else has to know about it, right? I think if you couple those three, having good suhbah, like you said, talk about khalwa. Khalwa is very important. All the best have done it in the past. Rasulullah did it. That's when he got revelation, when he was in khalwa, right?
Yeah.
And which says a lot. And then also doing service of people, and don't take pictures of it on Instagram and show people. Just do it on your own. Just go help people, help the poor, help whoever needs help. And I think that those three things are a remedy for a very vibrant individual. You know? And I think,
absolutely.
And you're not always going to be able to conquer every problem. That's what this life is for. It's a test, right? You're not going to be able to eliminate all the tests, but eliminating that portion of yourself to keep you against the choppy waves is more than enough to be successful, I think, in this world.
Yeah, one of my good friends went to Africa. And no, one of my friends just recently went to Africa. He's just experiencing a lot of problems, and it helped him reorient his life mission and figure out how to move forward. And he just spent time with people who were very poor and they needed his help, and he just found purpose.
Yeah, and now he's working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's involving his family in it too and stuff. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. what better way to help people that are poor to the other side of the world? I mean, it's amazing.
And he's lifting everyone else around him.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, because I want to put this disclaimer out that terribly sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to get.
Not at all.
The one thing that I would say is that if there is value in doing this, psychedelics for Muslims, if you ask, well, why can't you just do that? What Sheikh Amir just said with contemplation, charity, all that stuff. I would say this is not for most. If it is going to be approved, and if it after years of debate and scholarship, it does get approved. My guess is that it's not going to be meant for most people. It will be like just as Sufism, Tariqa is seen for some people but not others. Ayahuasca or DMT or psychedelics or whatever will be seen as acceptable for some people but not others. And what I mean by that is there this is not me saying for sure, there might be a hikmah in that Allah allowed these things to be placed in South America specifically for Westerners to go to, not just white people, but Westerners. And what do I mean by that? Because the West is so spiritually dead and broken. We're kind of atheistically, we're kind of like spiritually dead car batteries. And so there may have been a hikmah in putting this kind of stuff there for Westerners, or just seeped in Western materialism and atheism, and it's like those things could restart a dead car battery. And oftentimes Muslims who have a history of doing psychedelics, they do psychedelics and then it leads them eventually to Islam, either because of terrifying experiences or because of good experiences that show them God is real, the spiritual world is real, God loves you, there's a right and a wrong, you have to repent and change your life, blah, 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 blah. I don't recommend, if you're like on a good spiritual path in Islam, I would not recommend that you do this.
Yeah.
There's no reason for you to do that. If you're living in a village in Pakistan and you're married and you've got a good spiritual path and you've got good guidance, there's no sense in you going to Peru to do this. It doesn't make sense. So if this is right, it's for a limited number of people.
I imagine there's nothing like a blanket publication that would even come out. It would be more targeted towards specific individual, where someone like Harry or whoever is just struggling with this and have tried every possible avenue to treat their PTSD. A scholar may say in that situation to go try this as a possible remedy, but I don't ever see something that is so clear in the Quran where it's a prohibition on Khamr, that there ever being an article saying that it's okay because it's so dangerous for someone to get a license just to even say, hey, this article says I can go do it to treat PTSD. I don't think that would be that in itself is way too dangerous to release to a public. I think it would be someone on a one-on-one, someone comes to Sheikh Amir, says, hey, I've done all these different things to try to treat it. Should I? So, I'm very impartial. Sheikh Amir people and Shayukhin themselves are responsible for vetting out, like, why exactly is this person exploring this route? Is it for recreation? Does he want some kind of license for me to say, hey, this is okay? Or is he genuinely experiencing what he's saying he's experiencing? And has he tried other alternatives, whether it's therapy and other halal alternatives before he's trying to go towards this route?
And I think it would require an entity, for instance, like an example, like a Dar al-Qasim, to maybe talk to Harry and then do a bunch of research on it and find out other use cases and people who've went through similar thing. And obviously, because there's not too much Islamic literature on this at all, it would require an entity like a Dar al-Qasim, and you can reach out to them too. We'll give you their contact information.
Who's that one brother who does a lot of research on CBD? He came on a show just in my
Omar Sheikh from California.
Yeah.
He
forgot the name.
Yeah, Sheikh Omar. He actually had presented at AMJA, I think, and many other places, the legality or the use, even Islamically, allowed its ibaha of CBD, and he was on maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, Mustafa Omar.
Mustafa Omar, yeah. So he's somebody that would be awesome to start
I'd
with, I
love
think.
for Sheikh Mustafa Omar and Harry to sit down
Yeah.
and him really picking Harry apart and
Yeah.
really understanding what exactly he experienced and see how there could be any kind of utility of that in treating whether it's depression,
Anything.
PTSD, anything, you know?
Yeah, he'd be a good
Yeah,
start. Same thing with Dar al Qasim, because they do a lot of contemporary research. They have Islamic bioethics courses and teaching. I think that would be really cool. They have a group of doctors and scientists, I think, that work with them. I think that'd be a nice start too. Dar al Qasim, Illinois.
Yeah, that definitely. I would definitely love to talk to them. I don't expect this to be the group I went with had researchers in it. There's a doctor from Australia who was not necessarily the head guy, but he was definitely a leader in that group, trying to guide people, and also he was a sleep doctor, so he was trying to. He was definitely involved in that and researching that, and he's going to be writing all kinds of articles over the years. So there's a lot of research already for credible Muslim researchers to start with, not as a final point, but as something to start with. But I'm glad I would love to talk to those people. I suspect this is going to take many years of dialogue and discussion to really come to a conclusion on if any conclusion can be reached.
I know we're actually coming
Muslims
close to an end, but one quick question. I mean, if you can probably answer this in like in a minute or two. How different do you think this is from LSD? Did you ever? I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
I don't see LSD. See, a part of it is intentionality. I don't even know if LSD is DMT or if LSD is a different molecule. It might be a different molecule or a slightly different variation, so I can't really comment on that.
No, but I'm talking about the similarity of the hallucinations, and kind of the feeling in the emotional state. Do you know either that, or is it kind of similar?
It might be somewhat similar. LSD is apparently much more vivid, and it's much more hallucinogenic, whereas this is much more. I was told by one of the guys who ran the program, his name is Armand. I could put you guys in contact, or put the researcher in contact with that Armand. He's part of the Heroic Hearts organization. But Armand was on the phone with me before I went to this experience, and Armand just basically said, "It's like, you're probably not going to see the DMT elves." And I was like, "Really? What do you mean?" I was a little disappointed when he told me that on the phone. I was like, "I want to see the fairy chicks, man. What are you talking about?"
So
and
that's
he's like,
that's where that's where LSD's differed from Harry. It's LSD does not involve
contemplation.
There's like a center distinction between ego. So DMT is kind of breaking down your ego.
Yes.
LSD is more involving your own self. It's a distortion of reality where you're seeing different patterns and different things that are happening. Whereas DMT is it's taking a different trajectory in the alteration of reality. It's involving breaking down of the nafs almost and seeing the different components of who you are. Whereas LSD is just sending off on a different tangent, and
you said it better than I could, man.
Yeah,
that's for true.
Yeah, and LSD is basically synthetic, so it makes sense that DMT is part of nature. So
no, the reason I was asking is I think LSD originally was used for people who had some type of trauma or some type of PTSD, some type of derangements, I think, of the mind, and I think they started off with in like the 40s or something, like micro doses or 50, and then they started building up, and I think it was people who were like, I think they actually tested on serial killers, something to that extent. I can't. Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Tested it on people.
Yeah, what was the motive behind it? What did they see in LSD to?
Because they're trying to make killers.
Yeah,
they're trying to make killers.
The reason why I like, at least under the guise of treatment and stuff like that. I like the idea of DMT is because it's been tested for hundreds of, if not thousands of years. It's been used in these traditions where people are finding a bit more about themselves. The problem with a lot of human beings is that they just can't be truthful. They cannot see why they are the way they are. I believe centrally that the more truthful you are, the more you discover more about yourself.
That's amazing.
And not just about yourself, but you understand the world a lot better, and things start opening up to you. Not all of a sudden, but as you practice truth and you are critical of yourself, you're dissecting little intricacies of the why you are the way you are. Things about you start opening up. Just mysteries start opening up, and just people, you just cut through BS just like a knife through butter, and you're just like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening here. And when you start down this journey of truth, I think it's a much more longer journey, but you have much more fulfillment as well. DMT, I think, is a bit of a shortcut where you know, someone's, you know, could possibly face death, you know, through suicide or something like that, if they don't find truth. Because I think that's what essentially is happening. They're finding truth, but it's taking them down another rabbit hole where you're seeing what's manifesting in front of your eyes is different aspects of you, of who you are, and it's kind of representing itself through elves or whatever, what have you, and telling you a bit about who you are, what you hold dear to yourself, what your ultimate purpose is in life. And I think if people can practice being truthful, I think
I think
that
that's
in
why
itself.
people do a lot of journaling, right, before they go to sleep, about like just being 100% truthful with themselves.
You can be,
right?
that's the thing
And
too. Even
high
in
self-love.
journaling, you could be lying to yourself too. You know, and that's one of the things why so much therapy doesn't work for people. I know people who go to therapy and nothing changes in their life. They're still a mess. The
Oh,
reason
especially if you're like a hardcore narcissist. If you're a hardcore narcissist, you're good at telling a story.
yeah,
If you're a woman who's a hardcore narcissist, you've basically painted yourself as the victim forever and ever to the ages of ages. You're so good at lying, you've deceived yourself. You're
Interesting.
beyond. A lot of narcissists in particular are one of the hardest groups of people to treat clinically, because they're so deceptive that they've deceived themselves.
yeah. I mean, anyone who's
It's
disassociated themselves from reality, they've made themselves a hero, unwilling to criticize or look internally. They're the people who suffer the most, and
Wow, that's interesting.
and I think that's so true. And why I'm so careful because of there's some really good therapists out there, but I feel like a lot of therapy right now is just BS. Um, and I know some really good therapists that, you know, at Khalil Center over here in Chicago and stuff. I'm not dissing you guys, brothers. Please don't interpret that at all. But I think that there's a culture of BS in the therapy industry, and to become a money maker for people
Exactly.
who are lonely. They just need people to talk to, and these people are just milking them for money. You know?
I'm going to tell you one more story before we go here. So remember when I said this was a somewhat international gathering?
Yeah.
We had a couple people who were former members of the IDF, and this was right after October 7th. So I will say this: a couple of the guys that were former IDF, one of them in particular was he wasn't a hardcore Ben Gavir type of person. He was more like a Yitzhak Rabin, old school, like moderate liberal Zionist, kind of like, oh, hopefully we could get a treaty one day, and maybe this. He was a little less Zionist after the ayahuasca experience, and I will say that his story. I'm not going to say his name or tell all the details, but he had this experience of like seeing rainbows and colors and seeing humanity united after that experience, without putting too many words in his mouth. In other words, for his journey in particular, it was moving away from Zionism. moving away from that sort of harsh tribal politic. So this has profound political and social consequences as well.
That's
You
wild.
know, that if we work on ourselves, that's how you change the world.
Absolutely wild. Harry, we're coming up on 3 hours now. So, any last
My butt
thoughts?
hurts.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to go ahead and split out this episode and make sure that it's its own separate episode, and hopefully you guys share it and like it as well. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
I want their leader brought here. I want him brought to me. I want the revolution crushed.